What would you do if a wealthy stranger left everything to you, but their hidden past could change your life forever? Elliot Grayson lived in a mansion that most people could only dream of, a vast estate with intricate architecture and luxurious furnishings. But beneath its grandeur lay an undeniable emptiness. Elliot, a self-made millionaire in his early 50s, had built a financial empire from scratch but had paid a steep price for his success. A recluse by nature, he preferred solitude to company, haunted by regrets of a family fractured long ago. The only consistent figure in his life was the house manager, Bradley, a no-nonsense man whose primary focus was keeping the mansion running like. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, Olivia Turner was barely keeping her head above water. A single mother of 2 children, 10-year-old Ben and 6-year-old Grace Olivia, worked tirelessly at a diner and took on evening cleaning shifts to make ends. Every night, she would look at her sleeping children, vowing to give them a better life. When Olivia received a job offer to be a live-in housekeeper at a wealthy estate, she hesitated, worried about uprooting her children. But the opportunity promised stability and a chance to escape the relentless cycle of financial. On Olivia's first day at the Grayson estate, she was awestruck by the sheer size of the sweeping gardens, towering gates, and pristine interiors made her feel like she'd stepped into another. However, her sense of wonder quickly gave way to nerves when she was met by Mr. Bradley. He handed her a long list of rules, each one more daunting than the last. "Punctuality is a," he said sternly, "and please, keep the children out of Mr. Grayson's way." Elliot, on the other hand, barely registered Olivia's arrival. His brief acknowledgement consisted of a nod before he returned to the mountain of documents on his. Olivia couldn't help but notice the tension in his posture and the sadness in his eyes, but she kept her thoughts to her. Her main priority was settling into the new job and making the transition as smooth as possible for Ben and Grace. Despite her efforts to keep them occupied, Ben's adventurous nature quickly got the better of him. Fascinated by the grandeur of their new home, he peppered Olivia with questions about Elliot and the man. Olivia reminded him to stay respectful, unaware that Ben's curiosity would soon change everything. Elliot Grayson's life had been shaped by loss, though he rarely spoke of it. Behind the imposing walls of his mansion, memories lingered like shadows. A faded photograph on his desk captured a much younger Elliot alongside his late brother Michael. Their bond had been strong once, but the pressures of business and life had driven a wedge between. Elliot's wealth came at the expense of relationships, and his regret weighed heavily on him. He had vowed to avoid close connections ever since Michael's tragic passing years. For Olivia, the Grayson estate presented a stark contrast to her own modest life. Adjusting to the house rules wasn't easy, but she was determined to make. Every evening after her shift, she tucked Ben and Grace into bed, her heart swelling with gratitude that they finally had a roof over their heads and a warm place. However, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing in the house. Despite its beauty, it felt lifeless. As if Elliot had built walls around his emotions, as well as his. Her instincts told her that beneath his cold exterior lay a man who was deeply wounded. As the days passed, Ben's curiosity about the mansion grew. One afternoon, he stumbled upon the library, a room filled with towering shelves of books and antique furniture. There, he unexpectedly encountered. Ben's wide eyes and unabashed enthusiasm caught Elliot off guard. "Wow, this place is amazing. Do you read all these books?" Ben asked. His voice filled with. Elliot, momentarily taken aback, replied gruffly, "Not all at once." But despite his sharp tone, there was a faint smile tugging at the corners of his. When Olivia heard about the interaction later that evening, she was mortified. She apologized profusely to Elliot, but he simply waved it off, surprising her with his leniency. For the first time, Olivia caught a glimpse of a softer side to him. Meanwhile, Ben's encounter with Elliot left him even more curious. "Mom, I think Mr. Grayson is kind of nice, even though he tries to act scary," he said with a grin. Olivia chuckled, but deep down, she began to wonder if Ben was. It seemed her son's innocent perspective might hold the key to unraveling the mystery behind Elliot's garden. Elliot Grayson's days were typically a blur of meetings and business calls, but the arrival of Olivia Turner and her children had begun to disrupt his carefully crafted routine. Despite his initial reservations about having them in the house, Elliot found himself quietly observing their presence. Olivia's diligence and quiet determination reminded him of his own humble beginnings. while Ben and Grace's innocent laughter echoed through the halls, slowly filling the emptiness that had consumed the mansion for years. Ben, ever curious and adventurous, was determined to get to know Elliot better. He often found ways to bump into him, asking questions about the mansion or the impressive collection of books in the library. One evening, as Elliot was returning to his study, he noticed Ben struggling to reach a book on the highest shelf. Instead of walking away, Elliot retrieved the book for him. "It's a classic," Elliot said, handing it over. "But don't just look at the pictures, read it." Ben's eyes sparkled with excitement as he thanked him. It was a small moment, but for Elliot, it was a step toward reconnecting with the world he had long ignored. Meanwhile, Olivia was discovering layers to Elliot's character that contradicted his stern demeanor. While cleaning his study, she stumbled upon a collection of old photographs hidden in a drawer. They depicted a younger Elliot with a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to her late husband Marcus. The discovery left her unsettled, but she decided not to mention it immediately. She didn't want to pry into Elliot's personal life, especially not when he had shown signs of slowly warming up to her children. Grace, the youngest of Olivia's children, was also making her presence felt in unexpected ways. One afternoon, she wandered into the garden, where Elliot often went to clear his mind. Spotting him sitting alone by the fountain, she shyly approached and handed him a daisy she had plucked. "For you," she said with a bright smile. Elliot, caught off guard, accepted the flower. "Thank you, Grace," he replied, his voice softer than usual. It was a fleeting exchange, but it left a lasting impression on him. Despite these small moments of connection, the household wasn't without tension. Mr. Bradley, ever the disciplinarian, frequently clashed with Olivia over minor infractions. He disapproved of the children's playful energy, insisting that the mansion was no place for such antics. "This is a home, not a playground," he reminded Olivia sternly. Olivia defended her children, but she worried that one misstep could jeopardize their stay. However, Elliot's growing fondness for Ben and Grace became evident when he intervened during one such confrontation. "Bradley," he said firmly, "let them be kids. This house could use a little life." As the days turned into weeks, the dynamic in the Grayson household began to shift. Olivia noticed that Elliot spent more time in the common areas of the mansion, occasionally joining them for dinner or pausing to listen to Ben's enthusiastic stories about school. Ben and Grace's presence had awakened something in Hema, longing for the family connections he had lost. Olivia, too, felt a strange sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. However, the photograph she had found continued to weigh on her mind. One evening, as she prepared to tuck her children into bed, she decided to broach the subject with Elliot. Knocking softly on his study door, she stepped inside, clutching the photo. "Mr. Grayson," she began hesitantly, "I found this while cleaning. I wasn't snooping, I promise." But Elliot's expression froze as he took the photo from her hands. The room seemed to grow colder as he stared at the image. "That's Michael," he said quietly. "My brother." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, and Olivia could see the pain etched on his face. "What was your husband's name?" he asked, his tone cautious but curious. "Marcus Turner," Olivia replied softly. The name seemed to strike a chord with Elliot, and he looked up at her with a mix of surprise and recognition. "We have a lot to talk about," he said after a long pause, gesturing for her to sit down. Olivia sat nervously in the chair across from Elliot, clutching her hands together as the weight of his words settled over her. "Your husband and my brother," Elliot began, his voice tinged with both curiosity and apprehension, "were more connected than either of us could have guessed." He explained that Michael Grayson had always been the more adventurous of the two brothers, a free spirit who frequently traveled and forged friendships in unexpected places. One such friendship, it seemed, had been with Marcus Turner, Olivia's late husband. Elliot recounted how Michael had once spoken of a close friend who had helped him through a particularly dark time. The name Marcus had faded into the background of Elliot's memory, but now it resurfaced with startling clarity. "He always said Marcus was the kind of person who gave more than he ever took," Elliot said, his voice soft. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "That sounds like him," she said. "Marcus always put others first, even when he had so little for himself." For the first time, Olivia saw the vulnerable side of Elliot, a man who had been deeply scarred by his brother's untimely death. The memory of Michael stirred emotions he had buried for years, and as he spoke, Olivia realized that Elliot wasn't the cold, unfeeling man he appeared to be. Instead, he was someone who had walled himself off from the world to protect himself from further pain. Their shared connection through Marcus and Michael created an unexpected bond, one that neither had anticipated. Meanwhile, Ben and Grace's growing friendship with Elliot brought more light into his life. Grace, with her innocent charm, often brought him flowers or small handmade. Ben, ever the curious one, would sit with Elliot in the library, asking endless questions about the books and artifacts in the mansion. "Do you play?" he asked, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "I used to," Elliot replied, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Ben's enthusiasm was infectious, and before long the two were locked in a game. Olivia watched from the doorway, a smile tugging at her lips as she saw how her son's youthful energy had drawn Elliot out of his shell. "Your son has quite the strategic mind," Elliot remarked later, his tone warm. Olivia couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this job wasn't just a lifeline for her family, but also a chance to heal wounds she hadn't even known existed. As the days passed, Olivia's life at the mansion became more intertwined with Elliot's. She found herself noticing the little ways in which he had changed. He no longer spent every waking moment buried in work. Instead, he made time for the children, teaching Ben how to play chess and indulging Grace's love of drawing by buying her sketchbooks and art supplies. For Olivia, it was a relief to see her children thriving in an environment where they felt safe and valued. However, the deeper connection between their families left lingering questions. Olivia often wondered why Elliot had become so estranged from Michael in the years before his. She hesitated to ask, fearing it might reopen old wounds. But one evening, as they sat on the patio watching the sunset, "Michael and I were close once," he said, his gaze distant. "But as I became more consumed by my work, I pushed him away. He wanted me to take a step back, to focus on family, but I didn't let. By the time I realized he was right, it was too late." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "I didn't even get to say goodbye." Olivia reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You may not have had that chance with him," she said gently, "but you are honoring him now, in the way you are opening your heart to my children, and that counts for something." Her words seemed to resonate with Elliot, who gave her a small, grateful nod. Unbeknownst to either of them, Mr. Bradley had been eavesdropping from the shadow. The loyal house manager had served Elliot for decades, but he had grown increasingly wary of the changes in the household dynamic. He felt that Olivia's presence and the way it was softening Elliot was a threat to the order he had worked so hard to maintain. Deciding that it was his duty to protect Elliot from any potential harm, Bradley began keeping a closer eye on Olivia and her children. This tension came to a head one afternoon, when Ben, in his typical adventurous fashion, he stumbled upon an old trunk filled with Michael's belongings. Mr. Bradley found him just as he was pulling out a framed photo of Michael and Marcus. "What are you doing here?" Bradley snapped, his voice sharp. Ben froze, clutching the photo tight. When Olivia was called into the study later that day, she was met with a stern lecture from Mr. Bradley about respecting boundaries. Elliot, however, intervened. "That's enough, Bradley," he said firmly. "Ben's just a child and he's curious. If anything, I should have told him about this part of the house myself." This act of defense marked a turning point. Olivia saw in Elliot not just a man grappling with his past, but someone who was beginning to stand up for what truly mattered. It was clear that their lives were becoming inextricably linked, though none of them could yet predict just how deep. As Elliot allowed the Turner family deeper into his life, he began to experience emotions he hadn't felt in years. Warmth, and an odd sense of belonging. Despite his efforts to keep himself distant, Ben and Grace had effortlessly broken down his wall. Grace's innocent drawings of the big, kind man in the mansion now adorned the fridge, while Ben's natural curiosity had reinvigorated Elliot's once neglected hobby like chess and gardening. One afternoon while the children played outside, Elliot and Olivia shared a rare moment of quiet over tea in the sunlit dining. Olivia, ever observant, couldn't help but notice how much Elliot had saw. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "Ben and Grace adore you. I think they see the person you try so hard to hide from the world." Elliot chuckled, a rare sound that felt almost foreign to him. "They have a way of pulling out things I thought I'd buried for good." There was a pause before he added, "And maybe I've been wrong to keep those parts of myself." Their conversation was interrupted when Ben burst into the room, a torn piece of paper in his hand. "Mr. Grayson, look what I found," he exclaimed, holding up what appeared to be a fragment of a letter. Elliot took the paper and studied it, his face paling slightly. It was a letter from Mike. The fragment read, "Always believed in you, Elliot. I only wish we could have had more time to talk about Marcus and what we planned." The words struck Elliot like a lightning. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his tone sharper than intended. Ben hesitated, sensing he had stumbled upon something important. "In the old trunk in the library." Olivia quickly stepped in, apologizing for Ben's intrusion, but Elliot waved her off. This changes everything." Elliot became consumed by the fragment of Michael's letter, convinced it held a clue to something important. He began spending hours in the library, poring over old documents, photographs, and journals, in an attempt to piece together what Michael had meant. Olivia, though hesitant, offered to help. "If here is something to be found, we'll find it together," she said, her voice steady with determination. Their search uncovered more than just old letters. It unearthed long-buried memories and truths. Elliot found himself recounting stories of his youth with Michael, sharing moments he hadn't spoken of in years. Olivia, in turn, opened up about Marcus and the struggles they had faced together. The parallels between their lives became impossible to ignore, and with each shared story, their connection deepened. But as they grew closer to uncovering the full story, tensions in the house escalated. Mr. Bradley, still wary of Olivia and her children, warned Elliot that he was allowing his emotions to cloud his judgment. "You don't know them like you think you do," Bradley insisted. "They could be taking advantage of your kindness." Elliot, however, dismissed Bradley's concerns. "You've been with me for years, Bradley," he said, "but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I am truly living. If you can't accept that, then perhaps it's time we reconsider your role here." Bradley's departure left a noticeable void in the household, but it also marked a turning point for Elliot. For the first time, he was fully in control of his own choices, unburdened by the expectations of others. One evening, as Olivia and Elliot continued their search, they found a second fragment of Michael's letter hidden in the lining of an old suitcase. This piece provided more clarity, wanted to create something meaningful with Marcus, a foundation for those who've lost their way, just like we had. "Elliot, it's never too late to do what's right." The revelation hit Elliot like a tidal wave. Michael and Marcus had been planning to create a foundation to help underprivileged families, a dream that had been cut short by their untimely deaths. Elliot felt a surge of guilt but also a renewed sense of purpose. "This is it," he said, his voice trembling. "This is what Michael wanted me to do, and I failed him until now." The discovery ignited a fire in Elliot, and he began making plans to bring Michael and Marcus's vision to life. With Olivia's encouragement and support, he set the wheels in motion to establish the foundation. But as they delved deeper into the project, they faced an unexpected obstacle. Elliot's estranged business partner, Victor Langley, who had his own agenda and viewed the foundation as a threat to their company's profits. Victor's sudden reappearance brought with it a host of challenges, including legal battles and public scrutiny. Elliot realized that to honor his brother's memory, he would have to confront not just his past, but also the people who had enabled his descent into isolation. Olivia stood by his side, her quiet strength bolstering his resolve. Victor Langley was a man accustomed to getting his way. Tall, sharp-featured, and exuding an air of authority, he had been Elliot's partner during the company's rise to success. However, their relationship had soured over the years as Elliot distanced himself from the cutthroat practices Victor embraced. Now, with news of Elliot's foundation spreading, Victor saw an opportunity to exert control over the situation. Victor confronted Elliot in his office one evening, his tone condescending. "This little passion project of yours," he began, waving a hand dismissively, "is a distraction. Our shareholders won't tolerate you pouring resources into something with no financial return." Elliot, who had once capitulated to Victor's demands, stood his ground. "This isn't about money, Victor," he said firmly. "It's about doing what's right. Michael and Marcus believed in creating something meaningful, and I won't let anyone, including you, stand in the way of that." Victor smirked, his eyes narrowing. "If you continue down this path, I'll have no choice but to involve the board. You may own the majority shares, but I know how to sway people, Elliot. You'll lose everything if you are not careful." Unfazed, Elliot replied, "If doing the right thing costs me everything, then so be it, but I won't betray their memory." The encounter left Elliot shaken but resolute. Olivia, who had overheard the exchange, offered a comforting presence. "You are doing the right thing," she assured him. "Don't let Victor intimidate you. You are stronger than you think." As Elliot pushed forward with the Foundation's plans, the mansion became a hive of activity. Olivia took on an unofficial role as coordinator, working tirelessly to organize events, contact potential sponsors, and ensure everything ran smoothly. Ben and Grace contributed in their own ways. Ben offered ideas for community programs, while Grace charmed donors with her innocent enthusiasm. Despite their progress, the looming threat of Victor's interference cast a shadow over their efforts. The tension reached a boiling point when Elliot received a letter from Victor's lawyers, threatening legal action if the Foundation used any company resources. The stress began to take its toll on Elliot, who found himself questioning whether he had the strength to see the project through. It was Olivia who reignited his determination. One evening, as they sat in the library, she placed a hand on his and said, "You've come so far, Elliot. Don't let Victor's greed erase the good you are trying to do. Michael believed in you, and so do I." Her words struck a chord, and Elliot found himself opening up about his deepest fears. "I am terrified," he admitted. "What if I fail? What if all of this is for—" Olivia's response was gentle, but failure isn't the end. It's a step towards something greater. You are not alone in this, Elliot. We're in this together. Their conversation solidified Elliot's resolve, and he decided to take a bold step. He called a press conference, where he publicly announced the creation of the Michael Grayson Foundation, named in honor of his brother. Standing before the cameras, Elliot spoke from "This foundation is a tribute to my brother and his unwavering belief in the power of kindness and community. Together we can create a world where no one is left behind." Victor's response to Elliot's announcement was swift and brutal. He launched a smear campaign, spreading rumors about Elliot's mental state and financial stability. The media frenzy that followed threatened to derail the Foundation's progress, but Elliot refused to back down. The climax reached its peak when Victor filed an injunction to freeze Elliot's assets, claiming misuse of company funds. The legal battle that ensued was grueling, but it also revealed the depths of Elliot's transformation. Instead of retreating into his shell as he once might have, Elliot fought back with courage and conviction. Olivia played a pivotal role during this time, rallying supporters and organizing fundraisers to keep the foundation afloat. The community, inspired by Elliot's vision, came together in a show of solid. Donations poured in, and volunteers stepped up to help with the foundation's initiatives. The turning point came during a dramatic courtroom showdown. Elliot, armed with evidence of Victor's unethical practices, exposed his former partner's duplicity. The judge ruled in Elliot's favor, dismissing Victor's claims and allowing the foundation to proceed on. As Victor stormed out of the courtroom defeated, Elliot felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to Olivia, who was waiting in the gallery with Ben and Grace. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with both relief and gratitude. But the victory wasn't just about winning the legal battle, it was about the personal transformation Elliot had undergone. He had faced his fears, honored his brother's memory, and found a renewed sense of purpose. With the legal battle behind him, Elliot refocused on bringing the Michael Grayson Foundation to life. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, had been transformed into the Foundation's headquarters, bustling with activity. The grand halls now echoed with laughter, conversations, and the sound of lives being rebuilt. Elliot found unexpected joy in teaching chess to the children who attended the Foundation's after-school programs. Ben was always by his side, eagerly learning and helping the younger kids. Grace, meanwhile, had become a mascot of sorts for the Foundation, her bright energy lifting everyone's spirits. Olivia took on an official role as the Foundation's operations manager, her organizational skills proving invaluable. She worked closely with Elliot to expand their reach, launching scholarship programs and job training initiatives. Watching her thrive in this role, Elliot couldn't help but marvel at how much she had brought into his life, not just professionally, but personally. As the Foundation grew, the media began to shift its narrative. Stories about the positive impact of Elliot's work replaced the scandalous headlines Victor had orchestrated. Interviews with families who had been helped by the Foundation highlighted the profound difference it was making. One evening, as Elliot reviewed plans for the Foundation's first gala, Olivia entered his study with a box in her hands. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, setting it down on the desk. Inside were mementos from Michael's and Marcus's live-sold photographs, letters, and a journal Elliot hadn't seen before. As he flipped through the journal, Elliot was struck by one entry in particular. Michael had written about his dreams for the foundation, expressing a deep hope that it would bring their family closer together. "Even if I can't be there to see it, I hope Elliot will carry this forward," the entry read. The words brought tears to Elliot's eyes. Olivia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He does," she replied. "In everything you are doing, The gala itself was a resounding success, drawing supporters and donors from all walks of life. Elliot, Olivia, Ben, and Grace stood together on stage as Elliot gave a heartfelt "This isn't just my vision," he said. "It's Michael's, it's Marcus's, and it's all of yours. Together, we're building something beautiful." In the days following the gala, Elliot and Olivia found time to reflect on everything they had accomplished. Their bond, once rooted in shared struggles, had deepened into a partnership built on trust, respect, and a shared vision for the Ben and Grace, too, had flourished in their new environment. Ben had started a small library at the foundation, inspired by his love of books, while Grace was working on a mural to brighten the children's play. Seeing the joy and purpose in their lives filled Elliot with a profound sense of fulfillment. Even Mr. Bradley, who had initially opposed the Turners, returned to the mansion to apologize. "I misjudged them," he admitted. "And I misjudged you, sir. It's good to see you happy again." The foundation's programs began expanding beyond the local community, attracting national attention. Olivia and Elliot were invited to speak at conferences, sharing their story and inspiring others to make a difference. For Elliot, these moments were a testament to how far he had come from a lonely recluse to a man driven by purpose and connect. As the foundation's first anniversary approached, Elliot decided to host a community celebration at the mansion. The once quiet estate was now alive with music, food, and laughter, as families gathered to celebrate their shared achievement. Elliot stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the scene with a mix of pride and gratitude. Olivia joined him, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To everything we've built," she said, raising her glass. "And to everything still to come," Elliot replied, clinking his glass against her. In the weeks that followed, Elliot took steps to ensure the foundation's long-term sustainability. He established a board of trustees and began mentoring a new generation of leaders to carry the vision forward. Olivia, ever the planner, helped him draft a roadmap for the next 5 years, ensuring their work would continue to grow. And the mansion, once a symbol of Elliot's solitude, had become a beacon of hope and community. And in his heart, Elliot knew that Michael and Marcus's dream had not only been realized, but their legacy had brought him a new family, a renewed sense of purpose. Months after the foundation's anniversary celebration, Elliot's mansion was almost unrecognizable. Its once cold walls now radiated warmth, with children playing in the gardens, volunteers bustling in and out, and community members gathering for workshops and events. What had once been a symbol of isolation was now a thriving hub of hope and progress. Elliot, Olivia, Ben, and Grace had become a family in every sense of the word. They shared meals, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through challenges. On a quiet Sunday morning, they gathered in the sunlit dining room for breakfast. "Elliot," Olivia began with a smile, "did you see the article in the paper? They're calling the foundation a model for community-driven change." He chuckled. "I never thought I'd see the day when a Langston project would be praised for anything other than profits." Grace chimed in, her eyes sparkling. "I painted something for the foundation's new building." She held up a canvas that depicted a vibrant tree, its branches spreading wide, each one inscribed with words like hope, love, and community. Elliot's voice softened. "It's perfect, Grace, just like this family." As the seasons changed, Elliot began reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He often visited a quiet bench in the garden, where he could feel close to Michael and Marcus. One afternoon, Olivia found him there, holding a worn photograph of the 3 brothers. "They'd be so proud of you," Olivia said, sitting beside him. Elliot nodded, his eyes misty. "I just hope I've done enough to honor their memory." "You've done more than enough," she replied. "Their legacy isn't just in the foundation or the mansion. It's in the lives you've touched, the people who now have a chance at something better because of what you've built." Moved by her words, Elliot decided to take one final step to cement the foundation's future. "This estate," he began, "has been my family's home for generations. But now, it belongs to all of us. From this day forward, it will serve as the permanent home of the Michael Grayson Foundation." The crowd erupted into applause, and tears filled Elliot's eyes as he looked out at the sea of grateful faces. The decision to donate the estate marked a turning point for Elliot. While the mansion would always hold a special place in his heart, he realized that his true home was with the people who had become his family. Olivia, Ben, and Grace were his anchors, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Ben, who had grown into a confident young man, approached Elliot one evening with a heartfelt question. "Would it be okay if I called you Dad?" he asked shyly. Elliot's heart swelled with emotion. "Ben, nothing would make me prouder," he said, pulling him into a warm embrace. Meanwhile, Grace continued to blossom as an artist, her work gaining recognition in the local community. Her murals became a hallmark of the foundation, symbolizing the vibrancy and hope it stood for. Olivia and Elliot's relationship deepened as well. Over time, their partnership in work evolved into a partnership in life, and they found joy in the simple moments, sharing coffee in the morning, planning foundation events, and dreaming of the future. The story concluded with a touching family dinner at Olivia's cozy home. The group gathered around a long wooden table, sharing stories, laughter, and gratitude. Olivia looked around the table, her heart full. "This is what family feels like," she said softly. Elliot raised a glass. "To the people who taught me the meaning of love, hope, and resilience. Thank you for showing me what truly matters." As the meal ended, the camera panned out, capturing the group sitting under a canopy of string lights. The once lonely Elliot was now surrounded by a family who had transformed his life in ways he never imagined. The final scene showed the mansion, bustling with life and activity, before fading to a plaque near the entrance. The Michael Grayson Foundation, building futures, one life at a time. In the end, it's not the walls that make a home, but the people who fill it with love. And sometimes, the most unexpected connections become the greatest blessings of all.